Hello and welcome to TelecomTV. My name is Martyn Warwick. We are at the RAI Exhibition Centre in Amsterdam at Broadband World Forum 2014, and I'm talking with Sten Nordell, the CTO of Transmode. Sten, good to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for talking to us.
Great, thank you.
We're here at a broadband show. Obviously broadband is even more important than ever. And now with the OTT players in there, the constant demand for more and more video over the network and so on, it's putting immense pressure on things. Tell us what Transmode is doing at the show and what you're doing to help alleviate those difficulties.
So this year's theme is, of course, the 100 gig deployments that are happening now in the metro space. And we're showing off our next generation 100 gig metro solution, which is a low power, high density solution for metro applications. And it's also based on the pure pluggable technology.
Okay, let's go a bit further into it. What's so important about 100G to start with? Is it an arbitrary figure or does it have meaning?
Well, it has meaning in the sense that it's 10 times the 10 gig that we used to have as one of the higher bit rates.
Fair
40
enough.
gig, yeah. So 40 gig has been there for some time, but it actually hasn't taken off. What people have been looking for is the 10 times 10 gig performance. And also what's interesting with the 100 gig stuff is that it actually not only is a higher bit rate, but it also has built-in technology to make it easier to commission and actually run also in the metro networks. And that's the coherent capabilities that's been built into the 100 gig technology.
Now you talk about coherent optics. What does that mean? I know that there are various ways of tuning lasers and so on. What does coherent optics actually involve?
Well, there are a couple of things that it actually adds. One is it's pretty much a big modem, so we're using electronics to compensate in the optical domain.
Right.
But on top of that, it also gives us an easier way to balance the optical network. So it's easier to install. We don't have dispersion compensation capabilities that has to go into the network. All of that stuff is not part of the interface in itself, which makes it easier to run longer distances, but also run shorter distances and easier to install in the network. But there are some differences on how you deploy that. There is an analog way and a digital way, and that means on how you build your products and what is actually included on the pluggable optics that goes into the metro space.
It's very interesting to say there's an analog way of doing it when we live in an all digital, all IP world.
Well, light is analog, right?
It certainly is. Certainly is. When you say high density solution, what do you mean?
Well, there are two aspects of that. The 100 gig one is, of course, one of those interesting ones. But even the 10 gig also comes into play here. And we just launched a couple of new transponders, which means that we can put 6 transponders on a card, which means we can actually fill a chassis with 80 channels in one chassis. And that's very, very high density. And at the same time, it comes with low power. Currently, we're actually running our 10 gig technology at 5 watts per 10 gig transponder, including optics, which is as much as your iPhone charger.
Absolutely. That's
so it's
astonishing.
Very, very low.
How do you manage that? Is it just...
Well, intuitive technology, of course, and the way we've designed our products always has been for low power. And by using some new technologies that's been available in the last couple of years, or become available the last couple of years, we've been able to actually shrink the boards and shrink the power utilization.
Who are you selling to in the main, Sten?
So mostly tier 2s and slightly into some of the tier 1s. Alternate carriers, cable is pretty big for us. Europe and the US are the two biggest markets. We're just starting in Asia a couple of years ago.
There's a lot of talk about business transformation going hand in hand with technology transformation. Mm-hmm. How do you see that? How do you see this transformation playing out? Have people now accepted it's a necessity? Do they think it's something they have to do? Are they embracing it wholeheartedly?
Well, there is a lot of pressure on bandwidth, but there's also a lot of pressure to integrate different types of networks. So the broadband discussion we're having here is equally important when we talk about mobile technology as well, over the same type of infrastructure, as well as over the top services over the same infrastructure. And all of these things combined puts a lot of pressure on the network and the business that you need to do with these types of metro networks. And that means that the operators need to take a good look at how they actually deploy their network, specifically in the metro, because where we are playing in the metro are the ones who are actually collecting the traffic that comes from the access and marrying it putting it together, aggregating it, and then sending it forward into the core.
What about the new technologies such as SDN NFV, software-defined networks and network functions virtualization? Does that affect you, and how does it affect your customer?
It will affect the whole industry, and of course, being in the transport world, the transport SDN discussions is of very big interest to us. We actually launched our first SDN implementation about 9 or 8 months ago, and it's been shipping for some period of time. But we're taking a little more of a step by step, and I think at least what our customers are thinking here is that that's a good approach. Instead of a revolution, we can actually evolution it. So we started with layer 2 technology on the Ethernet side with automated provisioning, automated route selections, and we're adding that capability to the whole full range of products that we have, so we can do layer 0, layer 1, layer 2, and a 2.5 in one go, and that's going to be launched in the first half of next year.
You talked about tier 2 and tier 1 service providers and operators.
Yes.
And you also
and cable.
And cable. You mustn't forget cable, quite right. You mentioned the fact that you have some product now that's available. So the 100 gig we've been talking about, is that there now? Can people buy it?
Yes, it's been shipping for 4 months, and also it's not only been on the layer 1 path that we have, so traditional transponder and maxponders. We also put the pluggable technology into our packet-optical platform, so the whole Ethernet series of products have now also 100 gig technology built into it. And that has to do with the way that we've actually done our coherent capabilities, is that we have included the DSP, the electronics, on the pluggable unit in itself. So that means that it's easier for us to actually integrate it in multiple products instead of building multiple types of boards. We can actually put it into different types of technology.
You also spoke, Sten, about the metro marketplace. Can you explain what that means and how it differentiates from any other marketplace? Well,
the metro market differences in 2 aspects. One, it's a very incremental market. So we will have networks that have 2 gigs, 2.5 gigs, 40 gigs, and now 10 gigs and 100 gig on different types of wavelengths. And that's slightly different when you go into a long haul where you might build a new route and you put one type of technology onto it. So it's more of an incremental business. It's also a little bit more meshed. Traffic is not always going exactly the same direction, i.e. from point A to point B. You can have it going from multiple directions in multiple ways with different traffic types. So it's a much more versatile way of doing the network from an optical perspective. And the other thing that we have to deal with is that we have many access networks. We have cable backhaul, DSLAM backhaul, mobile backhaul, business accesses, Ethernet technology in different forms and shapes, and as well as some legacy stuff that we have to deal with. Fiber channel, for example, is not in the long haul, but it's in the metro space. And that means it's a little bit more complicated in the way that you put your products together. They have to be more scalable, they have to be more flexible, and encompass more different types of technologies.
And last question to you, I always like to end these things looking forward rather than looking back.
Yep.
What for the future then? We've seen the emergence of SDN and NFV over the past, from nothing to where it is now in 20 months. How do you see the industry panning out as far as Transmode is concerned over the next year, 18 months, 2 years?
So I think SDN is going to help us to actually cut some of the operational costs that some of these carriers are encompassing. So the CapEx is one side and the OpEx is another, and the SDN has its merits that it can actually help that. Easier provisioning, it is simpler provisioning and multi-layer provisioning as well, but also multi-layer service awareness, which is also interesting. So I think that's one aspect of it. Then of course higher bit rates is always of interest, so 200 gig and 400 gig. Now where terabit's going to end up, we don't really know, but eventually it's going to come into the metro space too. So if we take a 3-year period, I think that 200 and 400 is going to happen, and I think we're going to do more of 100 gig capable technologies in smaller form factors.
Well, we'll see what happens. Sten Nordell, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.